from your perspective, what you think are the main challenges at this moment in time for psychotherapists?
Well, as I see it, Alice, this is a time of enormous uncertainty. And you may know that one of my great interests is the experience of uncertainty, which I have put at the heart of trauma. But it's a special kind of uncertainty. We live in an uncertain world, but the experience of our uncertainty, of our going on being, is what I locate at the very, very center of traumatic experience. And my goodness, could there ever be a time when the experience of the uncertainty of going on being was ever more pervasive than this? So I think that what is central for me about this particular moment is that what is at the heart of trauma is forced into our awareness all the time, because we just turn on our smartphones or our televisions or get the newspaper or talk to one another, and there it is. This terrible virus, which no one really understands, no one really knows who will be affected, is just everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that as maybe the biggest difficulty that we face, is that we are immersed in this uncertain world right now.
And presumably for clients who have experienced early trauma, developmental trauma, this is going to be more challenging for them. So with your client group, are you noticing, what sort of responses are you noticing?
That is such a good question. And the answer is that there is no one answer to that question, because what seems so clear to me is that every single person I have encountered is experiencing this in his, her, or her own unique way. Yes, there are commonalities. People are talking about fears about their loved ones or their own vulnerabilities, but the way it connects to their sense of trauma in their early lives, or their sense of living in a traumatized world, is unique to each person. So there's no one size fits all about the coronavirus and its effects, or actually my way of relating to my patients around it. Each person is so different.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can notice some sort of themes whereby some people seem to be, here in London, we've been advised to, self-isolate and keep a distance from people. And some people are taking this terribly seriously, and some people are not. Some people are still gathering together in groups, even though they're outside or in the woods. So there's something about those that sort of over-engage and become extremely fearful and kind of isolate too much too soon, and those that are sort of in some sort of denial and then there's also a kind of a sort of heroic attitude of
Mm-hmm.
protection and preparation. So there do seem to be some overarching responses, I think.
Yes. In my client population, most people are taking precautions. No one has been oblivious. No one has taken the attitude of, oh, I don't need to take precautions. And I see quite a few people. So I don't know whether that's just what's happening in my little corner of New York, or whether I don't know what to make of it. But I can imagine that there would be people who would be in such denial that they would simply say, oh, no, it's not going to happen to me, and I don't really, and it's overblown. As Trump said earlier, this is just nothing to worry about. It's okay, I'll be fine. I haven't encountered one person who has shared that.
Interesting. And you're right, there may be different responses in London to New York. We don't know. Presumably there will be. And I think that it's parents with children who are, just need to get out of the house and need to connect with other people, perhaps.
What I have found in my patients who have young children is that they are enormously relieved that the evidence is that most of the young people who are affected do not get seriously ill. And that has been a great comfort to the parents of children. Of course, they're going out of their minds, keeping the kids at home and having to work from home and manage the children. Been very, very problematic for them. The group of, hardly a group, but I see two quite elderly women. They are feeling especially vulnerable because of their age.
Yeah.
I also have patients who have been extremely worried about me because I'm no young spring chicken here, and they are concerned about my taking precautions because of my age, not because they think I'm frail or but just that my age puts me at risk, and that has intensified their concerns about me.
I think that's a really interesting area, actually, because in this profession, the majority of trained, experienced psychotherapists are older, are in their late 60s and 70s.
Yes.
And so that group are now in a higher risk category. And what does that do to the psychoanalytic relationship, to the therapy relationship?
I think it does something that's very interesting, Alice. I think that the idea that somehow your analyst lives in a separate world where he or she is immune to the dangers that befall everyone else. There are people who idealize the analysts extremely. I know I did. I hardly could believe that my analyst ate food. When I started working with her, I thought that she lived with the gods on Mount Olympus and had no need for ordinary food when I first began with her. And some people are confronting the fact that we live in a shared world full of trauma for the first time, because they have been able to avoid that. And it puts me in touch also that I am in the same world, the same very, very traumatized world as my patients. With some people, it has actually made me feel very close to them, and they with me. I think that this is particularly true of those with a great need for what self-psychologists call twinship, a sense of like the other. And perhaps that was an experience that was hard to come by. But oddly enough, living with this awful blight, this pandemic, makes people feel, oh, we're all in it together, you and I. And that does change the therapeutic relationship to some extent for some people.
I can see that in some ways that experience, I mean, it shifts the relationships, it shifts the hierarchy, certainly, because suddenly no one's got this, no one's in charge. Our politicians are so woolly, and the analyst is in the high risk category. So it's complicated. And I think for those that have experienced parents that have had breakdowns or are, parents with their own lack of going on being, I think it could be really, really challenging.
I think you're absolutely right. And I do, you put your finger on something very interesting. And that is that the people who have needed to see me as super strong as immune to the dangers are often people whose parents were exceptionally weak in one way or another and have needed desperately to have sort of omnipotent, omniscient experiences of parental figures. And here we are. And here I am, an older woman who is, in their eyes, vulnerable suddenly. And so this is going to require a change in the, or make for a change in the analytic relationship that I will have to attend to. And you're putting your finger on something very important.
I suppose it's, you know, whichever way you theorize, it's something about, you know, those internal objects, are they secure enough or not? And will this process speed up that security or you know, regress it? And I suppose each client will respond differently, as you say.
Mm-hmm. There is also enormous uncertainty about what the changed format will mean. So we, you know, analysts and therapists are in a peculiar situation because what we took for granted as our standard way of working has been upended. I am brought into patients' homes now.
Yeah.
I see them at home. It is so revealing just to see their artwork, just to see the color of their walls, just to hear other people in the background has created a new world for me with some of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose, is it too much information, or is it, you know, because often we talk about how the client has to project the fantasy onto the analyst to get the transference going, but I'm wondering how much of that is going the other way around as well. And now you're like, oh, this person's home is immaculate. I really hadn't expected that. You know, something like that. It's a big piece of work, actually.
Exactly. We are getting information that we might not have gotten otherwise. And there is something, even when I look at you, Alice, really up close at your face, I am not. Usually, I don't sit very far from my patients. Very few are on the couch these days. But yeah, in fact, I don't have one person who has stayed on the couch, even those who have begun on the couch. I think everyone gets the idea that I like to look at faces, and so they they end up sitting face to face with me. Right. But here, peering into their faces, seeing the lines in their forehead and the way their mouths move in ways that I hadn't noticed before. So it is opening up all kinds of worlds to me that were closed before. Yeah,
that's interesting as well, isn't it? You know, the literal frame of what you're now seeing is completely changing, because you've got the background, and then you're saying that you're almost more attuned to the face, the facial expressions. So, because I suppose what one would assume would be that through a Skype conversation like this or Zoom, you might lose that attunement. And that, you know, particularly any sort of somatic countertransference, but maybe that's not how it is. I don't know. It must be different for everybody. But
what has been very interesting for me is that John Sletwald and I have been doing online embodied workshops.
Wow.
With people in Shanghai, a group of people in Shanghai, and from people all over, from Canada, from other parts of the United States, one person from Israel, and to our astonishment, people are able to be in touch with their bodies and show us what is going on with their patients through their bodies, even though we don't see them face to face, breathe the same air. So it's been astounding that video can be a very, very good medium for getting to know what's going on in people's bodies. Who would have thought? I do think that there is something to be said for having a whole body in front of me. and seeing hands and feet and getting subtle movements. I am deprived of that whole embodied experience, but I think that it's compensated for by the closeness of faces and the top part here.
Mm. So how long have you been working online for?
Well, I have started working online way before the virus took over the States. So I have had online relationships with people in England, in Australia, and in other parts of the United States. And I've done supervision actually online for many years before this. So I'm actually used to this. I like to see people at least some of the time face to face. And then with the people who have continued online, I feel we made good enough contact face to face so that it's been fine to work online.
Do you feel to work online, do you feel that you have to have an established relationship in the room before the work can go successfully online?
I prefer it. I think that helps enormously for me. I'm sure that on the IARPP listserv now, many people have been writing about what does it mean to start a therapeutic relationship online. And there are challenges, of course. But I would much prefer to have some contact with a person, person to person before working online with them, because I just prefer that the information that I get that way.
Yeah, excellent.
And I think that it's good for them too, because I think that my patients get to know me when they are sitting opposite me as well, and instead of just seeing the top of me on the camera.
Yeah. In terms of your colleagues, what are you noticing among your colleagues, how they're responding and coping?
What I notice is that people who have done online therapy and supervision previously are having an easier time of it. But people who are unused to it are complaining that it has changed everything for them. But it's just that we are all facing having to deal with the virus in the foreground, while other issues recede or just amplify what is going on about the virus. And I think that's a challenge for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if the virus is taking center stage of a therapy, and the meanings and how that's all sort of worked out. It's a lot more to come into the room. There's a lot more to contain, basically, isn't there? So and then the frame changes. So I can understand that lots of colleagues who've not used online before are feeling pretty stressed, actually. Yeah.
I think that's true. What I am reminded of is that when Trump was elected, surprisingly, in 2016, in this part of New York, this Upper West Side of New York, where all the left-wing folks hang out, many, many people in my patient population could talk of nothing else but they're upset about the election. It took weeks before they were willing to stop talking about politics and return to their own lives. Same thing happened around 9/11, when earlier. And that was somewhat similar to this, because therapists and patients were equally affected, or drenched in the horror of it all. And what happens is that people who would ordinarily never mention politics, never mention the outside world, are suddenly preoccupied and can't even focus on the things that were so urgent just 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and others manage to do a much more balanced shifting back and forth between their own issues and the situation in the city.
And I suppose psychoanalysis has generally been a bit behind the curve in terms of recognizing the influence of the external world on the internal world, and it's all been working through intrapsychic stuff. And I wonder if, you know, what with Trump and here with Brexit and now with the virus, it really amplifies that we are absolutely influenced by what we are living in. But then I suppose we process it through our own unconscious experience.
I think that's such a wonderful observation, Alice, because, you know, I have for many years taken what I call a relational systems view, which means that our lives are embedded in not only the worlds of our family, the world of our community, the world of our country, the world in general, and that we are affected by not just the immediate problems that we inherit from our family or early lives, but that what is going on in the world and what has affected the lives of our parents and grandparents also affects what is happening in the here and now of the analytic relationship. Here we are with a major dose of that. There's no escaping that reality now. You can't avoid knowing it.
And I just wonder as well, how much of our intergenerational experience that has unconsciously tumbled down the generations and landed in one's lap links in with, once again, being in an environment where there is an imminent threat everywhere that one has no control of. You know, if that has been in your intergenerational past, are you going to relive, you know? So it's heavy, it's complicated.
Absolutely. And I think that for some people, images of the Holocaust, for the patients whose relatives were caught up in the Holocaust in one way or another, this is a reminder of their experiences, the horror of something that is all around, that they cannot use their will to fight against, is bringing up lots of those things that were maybe before this buried in the deep past.
Yeah, and even, you know, going further back, the pogroms as well at the turn of the century. I think I agree. I think but it's deeply unconscious.
That's right. One of the interesting things for me that came up in particularly, I have a long-standing therapy group that has I run on Tuesdays from 6:15 to 7:15 in the evening since 1987. Of course, not the same person now, but but everyone met online last Tuesday, and you would be surprised at what the main issue was. It was their finances, their economics.
Yeah.
Everyone was so terrified of what it meant for them in this way. A businesswoman has had to lay off her employees, and she was heartbroken at what it meant for their lives. People are so worried about their bank accounts and their income and how this will affect their future. So I don't think anyone was terribly concerned about the stock market, but I'm sure that is in the background for people as well.
And also, it makes me think that, are people going to be able to continue paying their therapists? And what position does that put the therapist in?
Absolutely. And I think that the for me, it means being very easy about payments now. I'm not going to add to the pressure of patients who are having a hard time making ends meet and putting food on the table to get their bills in on time. I mean, I will have to confront the situation if I am taking too much of a hit and can't pay my own rent. But
Yeah.
I will, for the time being, I think that I will be very easy about this. And I'm sure that most of my colleagues will as well, that we will make allowances for the terrible hit that people are feeling economically.
My final question was what we actually think is collectively happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that we're all going through waves of deep fear and anxiety and the whole remit. And then I read a news article that says there are dolphins swimming in the canals in Venice, and the skies over Wuhan have cleared. And, you know, this is going to have an amazing impact on the climate crisis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so strange. But I think there are other strange benefits. No, I was out earlier walking in the park, and much earlier than usual, because the weather has been very warm in New York, there are cherry trees in blossom. There are daffodils everywhere. It is so beautiful, you can't imagine. And the striking contrast between the beauty of nature and what is in the air is stark these days. But I also think that perhaps we are all more mindful of what our human connections mean to us. Mm. And this terrible term, social distancing, it's so awful. And the idea that we must stay away from human contact, I think, is perhaps putting us all in touch with how dear and special and wonderful it is to be connected. Mm-hmm. And that maybe hopefully, I would like to think that the us and theming that has really divided my country and the world in so many ways will heal a bit when people have the sense that we're all in it together, yeah, and that we all need each other. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe that sounds very Pollyanna, but it is a wish, and a very fun one at the moment. So let's hope.
Let's hope, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think Hockney has painted some daffodils, and he's called it something like "They Can't Cancel Spring."
How wonderful! How wonderful! Yeah. The people in Italy singing and playing instruments on their balconies. How marvelous is that?
Yeah. So yeah, it's this contrast, isn't it? It's holding in mind that hopefully that there will be some benefit, some sort of collective psychic shift.
Oh, let's hope.
Let's hope.